everybody. I'm here with another amazing All Access with composer Dara Taylor. Dara, thank you so much for sitting down today. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I know we met just kind of, I think we've crossed paths just, your work with Chris Lennertz and me being at the studio sometimes. But I'm such a huge fan of your music and, been, watching your career grow. And, when I moved out there and seeing you do your projects and everything. And I'm such a huge fan of yours. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
No, thanks. Very nice.
So let's talk about your background. I want to go back and talk about, do you remember the first time music started entering your life, and when did it become, not so much as a hobby and interest, and you started to make this as a career?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people, I kind of grew up in music. My mom was the choir director at my church at the time. So I was always kind of around music. My, dad was always putting on records. My mom told me I used to crawl into her keyboard bag and zip myself up. So, but I started to, I was in school choirs and the bands and the musicals and all of that stuff. And when I graduated high school, I was going to. I already knew where I was going to go. I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do. I originally applied to Cornell as a computer science major,
Oh, wow.
and took zero computer science classes. I had a friend who was like, "Well, you're always in music. Why don't you study music?" And I'm like, "And do what with that?" So because in my mind, even though I obviously heard a lot of film scores and I listened to film scores, it wasn't a thing that I thought of as a job. I think music,
Right.
you think performing, and I think that's what a lot of people grow up thinking. But I did it anyway. I switched to being a music major, and studying theory. I was studying classical voice, art songs, arias, all that stuff. But I still knew that while I, loved music and I enjoyed singing, it wasn't really where I saw myself. I didn't see myself doing that every day, all day, every
Right.
day. I was very bad at being in the practice room, so I'm like, this is only going to get more intense later.
Yeah.
You can't really cram a practice, even though I would try my best. Um, and yeah, so it was sophomore year. I was kind of sitting around listening to Harry Gregson Williams' score to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
There you go.
And there was a cue that I can't remember the name of at the moment, but I remember the scene. It was, Mr. Tonus is like playing his little flute by the fire, and like things are dancing in the fire.
Yes, yes.
And something just kind of clicked in that moment where it's like, oh, maybe this is my path in music. Um, so I kind of took that moment as a sign, I guess, because I still remember it. And then I immediately hid that because, at the moment, at least at the time, there was a lot of pretension, and film music was looked down on. But
Yeah, yeah.
I hid it until the moment it was necessary to apply to grad schools. But I mean, I started studying kind of contemporary classical composition and that sort of things, and I would do arrangements for my a cappella group and all that stuff. So I'd
Yeah.
find ways to write, and then there was a electronic music class that I took with Kevin Ernst, and there was like a film scoring project there, and that was really exciting for me. And I did like one of my friend's student films while I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, after that I did the NYU uh, film scoring grad program. Um, that is where I initially met Alex Bornstein. We went to school together, and then I stayed in New York for a while trying to do it, and was not doing it well.
New York, yeah, New York is a, I don't know. My uncle lives in Hoboken, so I've been up there and I spent time there, but I feel like I could never live in New York. I don't know. It's so hectic and crazy. I love
Oh,
visiting, but
I love New York as a city. I
yeah.
loved living there. But I just don't think I had the chutzpah, to use a
No,
word,
yeah,
to try and find something there, because there was just less of it. And there are people that do it and do great there,
sure.
and like
Oh, yeah, there's
hats
some
off to
great,
them.
yeah, there's a lot of composers
Yeah.
based in New York doing great. Yeah.
Yeah, I was not one of them. You know, they say if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. But if you can't, you pack up your bags and go across the country and you try
Go to
again
LA.
in Los Angeles. So that is what I did. And my boyfriend and I, we moved out to LA. And the only thing I really knew, we didn't really know anyone. I had like a couple of college friends that were here, but they weren't in the film business.
Right.
Um, and yeah, the only thing I knew was the Society of Composers and Lyricists because they had a branch in New York, and I went to a lot of events there. The NYU professors were steering committee members, so we learned a lot about the SEL. So that was the first thing I did. We came, we moved, we 3 days later, I went to a screening of Gravity to give you some temporal clues there
Yeah.
with Stephen Price. And at the end, Laura Dunn, who was the executive
Yeah.
administrator
That's
at the time,
right. Right. Yeah.
she has the whole spiel and she talks about if you ever want to volunteer, let us know. So I walked up to her and I said, hey, I'd like to volunteer because I felt like it was a good way to kind of get to know people much more quickly than sitting in a corner of a room holding a drink and it was like, all right,
Absolutely.
which group
Just
of people do I talk to now?
yeah,
Um,
awkwardly walk up and stand next to a circle,
yeah,
hoping they'll
exactly,
open
and
up.
wait
Yeah.
for them to start talking to look at me.
Yeah. I've
It's
been
awkward
there
then, it's
many
awkward now.
times.
So this way, I had a reason to talk to people. People had a reason to talk to me,
Right.
and through there, I kind of met my first industry friend, who's Catherine Joy, and she was invited by Mark Robertson, the concert master, to. This is a really long story.
No, it's
Um,
great. Keep going. Keep going. No, because I know all these people you're talking about. So
yeah, I'm
yeah.
just name dropping everywhere. Uh, she was invited by Mark Robertson to go to sit in at a Revolution scoring session,
Mm,
which I think was at Sony. So she's like, "Hey, do you want to come with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want to come with you." This was like the first like live scoring session that I'd seen. It was amazing
yeah.
to just watch it all happen, and that is where I first met Chris, and
Christopher
that is
Lennertz for
also
anybody. Yeah.
yeah, that's also where I ran into Alex Bornstein again because Alex was Chris's assistant at the time,
Okay.
um, and so we reconnected, and I heard about the Sonic Fuel internship program, so he put me in contact with the studio manager, and then I applied for that, and then I was an intern for 5 months, I think. I think it was a 3 month program, but we were moving. I don't know. It just made sense to stay on for a little bit
Right.
longer. Maybe it was whatever it was. And then as my internship was ending, the studio manager at the time was leaving. So then I was interim studio manager for another 5 months. So I just kind of hung around and got to know everyone a lot more and kind of prove my general usefulness.
Yeah. What you can
and
do. Yeah. That.
yeah, I'm like, I'm not leaving. I'm
You're right.
still here. Um, and then by the time that tenure had ended and they hired someone more permanent as studio manager, um, Chris was kind of doing some restructuring and needed a part-time tech, second tech. So he brought me on, and really Alex brought me on, and I started kind of helping assist part time, and then that turned into full time, and then eventually Alex went off on his own, and then it was just me, and I was score producing and doing additional music, and kind of like being everywhere all the time, and
Yeah.
like really enjoying kind of being his left hand gal. And yeah, I worked for Chris for, if you include interning, I don't know, almost 6 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's a
So
long
like he
time.
is a
And
huge part of my career and life and
oh, Chris is
overall
fantastic.
well-being.
Yeah. And I remember being at the Sonic Fuel launch when they opened and everything, and just such an amazing space that you got to be in as well. So, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, you worked in the large capacity with Chris over the, half a decade. Um, and a lot of composers go that route and they work as additional composers and they kind of learn the craft that way. What would you say was the best part of being kind of that role? Did you learn more about the industry than you could have learned anywhere else?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, since being on my own, I'm thankful, and of course there are still some blind spots that I'm learning, and every situation is different. But
Sure.
one thing that I don't really have to, I didn't have to like crash learn as I was, the lead composer, is how to deliver, how to kind of deal with execs and music supervisors and music editors and all of these people that are part of the overall gestalt of the music department.
Right.
Um, because that I've watched and learned and globbed on as much information as I could during my time there. So I didn't have to learn how to be a studio composer. I just needed to write it now.
Exactly.
And of course, there are lots of things, you realize, okay, you know the basics, but there's all this other stuff that you got to learn. But, I know how to deliver you know, I know how to deliver a movie to a dub.
There you
Um,
go.
and I kind of had a team in place as I started out because, my friend Josh Margolis was kind of like the second engineer for Chris for years, and he's now my lead engineer. And like, I deal,
Yeah.
I'm at Craft Angle. I am at, I use the same copyist. It's like I had already formed a lot of relationships that um, were very imperative when it came time to like go fast because things changed faster for me than I would have anticipated. So,
Yeah.
which I'm very thankful for. But yeah, I'm really glad that I had all these relationships in
Yeah,
place.
I think some people don't realize how, and I think the one part I miss about of living in LA is kind of what the great community, the composer community is, and the music community. And it's a big city, it's a crazy city, it's a difficult city, but having places like the SCL, and I was editor of the magazine there. I know you're still work. I mean, you did a great job with the app. I know I saw your name, I think, next
Oh,
to the app, and like I was just helping
the
out and stuff
previous
like that.
version of that. But yeah,
A
they did a
previous
better
version.
job after I left.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But it's like, yeah, helping out and stuff like that, and people just supporting each other, and I think that's fantastic, and especially with,
Yeah.
with techs and publicists and agents, kind of, but enough about all the crazy business stuff. I just want to, talk to you maybe just in general, just about your process as a composer and as a storyteller. And I like to ask composers the same question, because I feel like every question, the answer is different. But for you, where does the first note come from when you're sitting down and you're starting on a project? What, I mean, I'm sure it's gonna be different for every project, but like, where do you usually gravitate towards? Do you like to see the first cut of the film? If you're lucky enough to be early, do you like to read the script or just talk with the filmmakers? Like, what's kind of your process to get that first initial idea out of your head?
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate recently to be on kind of at the script stage, and I love that. I love being able to
Yeah.
like percolate ideas and kind of divorce the creative from the delivery. Because when you're on, it's like, okay, you're starting, we deliver this in a month and a half, go. It's all kind of one big thing, and it's like, yeah, I would
Yeah.
have loved to do that. Do we have time to do that? I don't know. And like you second guess yourself on all these things because you're thinking of the logistics of it. And
Right.
maybe that's also one downsides of like being the logistics person for so many years. I'm like, this seems difficult. Um, but but yeah, I mean, if it's script stage, then I have lots of conversations with the filmmakers early on. If it's script plus a little bit of dailies or boards or anything, um, that I can get an idea of the characters and the way they present themselves and their mannerisms and their gaits and their speech patterns and all that stuff. I love all of that too.
Yeah.
But I for me, the first note kind of comes. I mean, I'll usually kind of sit down at the piano or the guitar or humming or one of those things, depending on the vibe of
Do
the
you like, I
score.
know a lot of composers like record they'll just hum into their phone and stuff. Do you do that as well?
Oh, I've got like all of these like voice menu or voice memos, and they just say like new recording this date on this highway, and I'm like, yeah, that was dangerous. Um, but, but when it comes to it, you gotta record it.
Yeah, yeah, because the
All
idea will
the
just
405.
disappear. Yeah, when you're sitting in traffic.
Yeah, still I'll blow up my game voice memo. But yeah, for me, I think the first thing that I like to find is kind of the instrumentation, um, because sometimes I'll play around with some sort of thematic idea, and it was like, this isn't working. You try on piano, I'm like, there's just something wrong about this. But then you try putting it in a clarinet or putting it on the guitar, and all of a sudden it has more life to it, and you're like, oh, okay, this is what should
Yeah,
come next after that. So I find the most effective way for me to kind of speak through a character or a situation is to kind of find its voice first, and then go from there.
absolutely. And you've gotten to work on a number of different genres as well. And as a composer, would you say that each genre of filmmaking comes with its own different approach? Like, does a comedy score require different music than an action score versus drama, or do you just kind of you're just there telling the story? What's kind of your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, each has a different approach, and sometimes a different set of instruments and all of that. But I don't know. I'm very thankful for, like, my comedy school, because I worked on a lot of comedies while working with Chris as well, and I think it just kind of helps, not just in comedy but in drama and in
Yes, yeah.
horror, um, finding the
Horror specifically, yeah, I think, yeah,
yeah,
they're very,
finding
yeah.
spotting and finding places to drop out or to sustain, and really kind of tell and shape the scenes more dramatically. And I think you're able to kind of paste over more things in
Mm,
dramas. So I think you learn much more quickly about how to find the most shape for a scene through comedy, and then you can strip that away if necessary.
yeah.
But that helped me a lot with my animation as well. Is when I did a lot of animation this year, and I didn't do a whole lot of animation before, but I did a lot of comedy, and they kind of go hand in hand because a lot of it is just
It's very
speaking
crafted, it's very
dramatically and shaping.
particular. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Whereas,
Crafting.
like, yeah, timing, and I mean, the way you mentioned it is perfect, because yeah, horror and comedy and animation is all about timing, and just in animation, everything is frame by frame, literally created from scratch. So there's
Yeah.
not any. And yeah, and we're both in the same. Yeah, we both have the same kind of boss now. We have Sam Register above us.
Oh
He
yeah, that's
runs.
true.
He runs Warner Brothers Animation. He also runs Cartoon Network Studios. So I saw you with Little Ellen. I thought that was awesome. I was in meetings
Yep.
there with HBO Max talking, and they're talking about Little Ellen. Like, oh, that's Dara's show. So, but and mentioning comedy though, you also recently scored Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, which my wife and I loved and enjoyed, and you got to co-score that with Chris. So maybe just briefly talk about, yeah, scoring that kind of comedy, especially when you have two leads that are, I mean, they carry the film with their performance, and how do you navigate that musically?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a really great experience. It was my first COVID movie. At the time, we thought it was going to be the only COVID movie, but surprise! Um,
2 years later.
and all the movies are COVID movies. But yeah, no, Chris was really gracious enough to kind of bring me on to that, and yeah, and a lot of it was spotting and timing, because they're so funny, and the last thing you want to do is get in the way of the
Exactly,
jokes,
yeah.
or even lead up to jokes so much. And is it a physical gag, or is it is it a punchline, and like you want to
Right,
treat those differently. Physical gags or like sharp cuts, I think it's easier to like drop out and kind of have that whole moment um, be a shift. But if it's just a punchline, you don't want to lead up to that.
right.
So no, it was great, and it was so layered. It's like, yes, it's a comedy, but it's also like a heist and an adventure and an action
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
a tropical
I feel like
what
Chris gets
have
into
you.
a lot of those mixed genre films. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very mixed genres. So we got a chance to play around with a lot of things, a lot of
Yeah.
Latin percussion, and also you know, opera singer, and also also big orchestral moments. So
Yeah,
it was a really fun project to work on.
absolutely. And coming back to Little Ellen, which is, again, I work in children's animation. I work in Cartoon Network Studios, even though we're kind of branching out and doing a little bit more, not just kids 6 to 11 or preschool or anything, but talk about, a lot of people I think kind of just look over that stuff, whether it's Disney Junior, or Cartoonito now with HBO Max and stuff like that. But talk about composing for that audience. And did you have to approach it in any different way? Did you, I mean, I grew up on like Don Bluth and stuff like that, and all these filmmakers, but how do you treat the emotional kind of arcs for a children's show like that.
Yeah. I like to say that in animation I am the loudest version of myself.
Yeah,
um, Whereas, like, you play it hard no matter what it is because the stakes are always high for children.
right.
Um, so and you play it as earnestly as you can. So with Little Ellen, you know what the filmmakers wanted was, because it takes place in New Orleans, is to have, pretend like there's a New Orleans street band just off screen
Mm.
and they're commenting on the music. So that was the instrumentation that we used for the vast majority, and then other things come in stylistically if there's, you know, a Halloween episode or a noir
Right.
episode and all of that stuff. But like, I love pop brass, and it was really fun to write for pop brass every day. Um,
I bet. Yeah.
um, yeah, so yeah, just like trumpet, saxes, trombone, bass, and then synths for orchestra and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah, I always find that our shows usually, and really kind of allow for that kind of creativity and just to explore and do stuff that you would not normally get to do, even in like, whether it's like a Pixar film or something, but just have television animation, which is also the last, I know, place where you can find 2D animation as well, so
yeah, yeah,
so
and it was a lot of fun doing, like, okay, what is like our Little Ellen New Orleans world um, version of this genre of music and this genre of animation and all that stuff, So it's still kind of looking at everything through this lens and then peppering in to taste. Um,
absolutely, yeah.
yeah, but there are a lot of shifts and changes throughout scenes and throughout sentences and all that stuff.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, yeah, scoring for animation and scoring for live action are definitely different animals.
Yeah, and then of course the episodes are much shorter as well, so you're looking, or you do 11 minutes, or are they 22
Yeah,
minutes?
yeah, they're 11-minute
11
episodes.
minutes, yeah. So that's what we typically do, is 11 minutes. So yeah, so
Yeah,
it's you're telling the story in a very short amount of time. So
yeah,
and then
yeah.
but
But you're screaming at them the whole time.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Watch the television.
yeah.
Don't look away. But yeah, I mean, that's amazing. That, I mean, just down the street at Warner Brothers, we're up Olive. So but yeah, Sam
Awesome.
now manages both studios, so I get to see him a
Yeah.
lot.
Our checks get
um
signed by the same person.
exactly. So let's jump into your movie that's coming out this month, The Tender Bar, directed, I think, by some up and coming filmmaker, George Clooney.
Yeah, you might have heard of him. I don't know.
Yeah, new guy on the Ben Affleck, whatever.
Mhm.
But so that's amazing. So congratulations on this project. I think it's so
Yeah.
exciting. I'm so happy for you. Just so talk. I mean, people are probably curious. How did you get involved with this? How did you come to be working on this project?
Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy phone call to get. Let me tell you. I think Sarah, my agent, was. I think this was the day right before she went on maternity leave, and she's like, "Hey, so I've got Laura on the line." Yeah. So basically, it's a I mean, it's such a sweet movie and it's so
Yeah,
charming, and um, it's very song heavy. There's a lot of songs and needle drops, and I think initially they thought that it would be all needle drops. And
mm,
then as they got further in the edit, they decided that some score was necessary to tie some things together and for emotional beats and all of that. So and because it was a smaller amount of score, they wanted to try and to try someone that was local and someone that was a little earlier on in their
sure,
career and kind of get them a leg up, which was great. Um, so I had actually done an episode of a docu series on Netflix that George and his producing partner Grant
yeah.
had
Grant
executive
Heslov,
produced,
yeah,
called Trial by Media, and that's a gig I got because of the Sundance Lab, which is a whole nother thing. We could have a whole nother
yeah. I
conversation
know
on.
you're part of
But
that. Yeah,
Um, yeah, Yancey Ford was one of the mentors at the Sundance Lab, and he reached out to
Mm.
me later on and asked if I would be interested in scoring this episode, and I did something else for him later on as well. And yeah, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize you guys paid attention to that. And they're like, yeah, we paid attention.
That's amazing.
So yeah, so that was an incredible ride, and everyone was really great to work with and as gracious as you could ever imagine. And yeah, so we recorded that in September.
Oh yeah, so that's
Yeah,
not too long ago. Wow. So
yeah,
that's when I was emailing you, and then you're just like, I'm
yeah,
busy right now.
yeah. No, that's what I was doing.
Yeah, talk to me in December.
Yeah,
But yeah, so you mentioned the needle drops, and I've talked to composers who've worked on navigating that territory of needle drops, of when to score to come in, when to come out. And this movie does seem like it's a heartwarming, and a lot of movies lean into that kind of melodrama and embrace it, and some people say it's a negative thing, and it can be depending on what tone you're going for. But I think this really embraces it and wants to be a heartwarming drama with something of comedic touching moments. Talk about finding that tone, and what did the score have to do between the needle drops and the project?
yeah. So it really needed to add, um, for lack of a better word, tenderness, and
Yeah, yeah,
and also some kind of bittersweet melancholy, which is kind of the general emotion that the main character feels throughout the movie until he kind of like comes into himself and
yeah. It's
makes
following
his mind
Jr.
up.
It's based on his memoir, and it's just from childhood to early adulthood. And I mean, you're carrying that
Yeah,
character throughout. Like, it's a
yeah,
big arc.
family dynamics and relationship dynamics and all of that stuff. So so in addition to creating a theme um, that would carry on from beginning to the end. Um, and I think when there are so many needle drops, you notice the theme more often when it comes in, because it's like,
Right.
oh, okay, that's something familiar, um, versus individualized songs. So yeah, but we wanted, it's very kind of sweet and simple, acoustic guitar, strings, piano, that whole vibe. Um, and we wanted it to not be so disparate from the needle drops,
Right.
but still, have its own character.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was looking back at it, what was the most rewarding part of the project for you?
Um, I mean, I really enjoyed going to the premiere and meeting everyone in person. That was pretty cool. But I mean, I think just in general, just working with that wonderful group of humans and
I mean,
and
yeah, I guess we can rewind a little bit back. Yeah, talk about working, I guess, during COVID on something like this, and how and navigating that. And are you just on Zoom calls with George Clooney all the time? Like, how is that?
yeah, it's weird. It's like, how was your summer? Yeah,
Yeah.
that yeah, yeah. We had a few Zooms and phone calls and emails and all that to kind of get the tone right, because it took a couple of tries to kind of nail that down, and yeah, but I mean the I would have meetings with him and Grant and the editor and music
Mm.
editor. And everyone's at home. I think George was in Italy at the time, um, according to the tabloids. But
I bet.
um, yeah, but it was. I guess at that point I had done enough kind of Zoom movies for
Yeah.
it, for everyone to kind of get a lot of the kinks out with software and stuff as well.
Right. Right.
Um, and I think it was also probably a little less intimidating for me.
To just have it be on the screen. Yeah.
Yeah, at the beginning, I'm like, oh, what do I do? So no, but it was a really great experience from start to
Yeah,
finish.
and then getting to be at the premiere, and I mean, was it just great to me? Yeah, just to shake everyone's hands and just talk and finally celebrate all that work. I mean, it must have been great.
Yeah, no, it was really great to finally kind of be together. That
Yeah,
was sort of my first, post, vaccination and all that stuff event. So um, it was also nice to leave the house and
I'm
put
sure.
on some clothes.
Actually dress up and have somewhere to go. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, congratulations again. I mean, such an amazing accomplishment, and the film comes out in theaters this month, and will be on Prime in January. Um, so, is there anything that's in the works right now that you can share? I know there's NDAs and stuff, but is there anything that we can look forward to?
I don't. I never really know when I'm allowed to talk about things. So,
Then we should probably
yes,
just keep it
there
quiet.
are things coming
There are
up,
things.
and they'll be exciting when they come
Yeah,
out.
when the studios announces, that's when it's, I guess, okay to
Yeah,
talk about. Yeah. Let's keep everyone's jobs. Yay.
yeah, that sounds cool. But but yeah, working on a few things, comedies, some dramas, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, today, I have a Blumhouse TV movie called American Refugee that Ali Leroy directed. That's out on Epics today.
Oh, nice.
And I did a Lifetime holiday movie called Holiday in Santa Fe.
Oh yeah,
That's
with
out
Mario
on,
Lopez, right?
Mario Lopez.
Yes.
But yeah, next year I hit a bunch of different studios, and it'll be a fun year.
Awesome. Well, Dara, thank you so much for talking today. It's so great catching up, and thank you for sharing some of your insight. And we'll talk again maybe the end of next year when you have a lot of more projects on your plate.
Sounds good.